Hi, everyone. Welcome, everyone. Just a reminder to please unmute yourselves as you enter. The meeting is being recorded. We'll have a chance later on to unmute or ask questions. We're just settling in now for another minute or so before we begin. So get comfortable and we'll start in a minute. Good afternoon, everyone joining us from all across the world today. Welcome to the first of a two-part session with Guidehouse on interviewing success with Guidehouse. Today, we're joined by special guests and experts who will be sharing more about their work, the company, the application process, timeline, and also strategies to make standout applications as a Guidehouse candidate. Next week, more experts will share all about case interviews and teach us how to ace them. Attendees in today's session who had registered prior to yesterday had the opportunity to submit questions that we'll be asking our experts today. But for any other questions that come up during the session, please add them to the chat box and I will consolidate and incorporate as we go along. So without further ado, welcome all and over at the team at Guidehouse.
Thanks, Roshni. I think where we'll start today is maybe with some brief introductions, first of ourselves, and then we'll go into a little bit more about Guidehouse specifically. So by way of introduction, my name is Stephanie Chapelkin. I'm an associate director with Guidehouse. I've been with the organization for just over 3 years now, having started as a senior consultant. By way of introduction, I guess my PhD is in molecular and cellular pharmacology, which I got from Stony Brook, where I studied the molecular mechanisms of pancreatic cancer metastasis. Although my screenshot there does say I'm based out of Princeton, I am in the New York office for the day. Over to Linlin.
Thanks, Stephanie. Hello, everyone. My name is Linlin Yang. I'm a senior consultant based in Guidehouse Philly office. I joined Guidehouse in 2020 during the pandemic. And before this, I got my PhD from University of Pennsylvania in chemistry. And I will hand to Mihir.
Hey, everyone. Great to be here. And thanks for having us. I'm here. I'm a senior consultant based out of the New York office as well, and been with the firm since July of 21. And prior to starting at Guidehouse, got my PhD in chemical engineering from Northwestern. So glad to be here today.
Thanks, everyone. And sorry, go ahead, Roshni.
No, please go ahead. Take it on. Take it away.
Thanks. So just to give everyone a little bit more of an overview about Guidehouse more broadly. So some of you may be familiar perhaps with some of our prior organizations that we were affiliated with, and there's been some mergers and acquisitions along the way. Perhaps if you've heard of PricewaterhouseCoopers, their public sector, Navigant, we have all kind of come together under the overall umbrella now of Guidehouse. And you can see on this slide, there are various different segments that we capture, including defense, energy, sustainability and infrastructure, financial services, health, national security, and state and local government. And here, when we think about what Guidehouse is overall, is we're a leading provider globally of consulting services to the public and commercial markets, specifically focusing on management, technology, and risk consulting. And when we think about where we're going across these different segments, we're focusing on markets that are specifically facing transformational change, technology-driven innovation, and significant regulatory pressure. And so with our capabilities, we're looking to help our clients create scalable, innovative solutions to prepare them for future growth and success. Now, Linlin, Mihir, and myself, we're here representing the life sciences group specifically, which is captured within that health arm more broadly. So health then has a commercial and a public sector, and we are within that commercial sector with life sciences. So to give you just a little bit more of an overview of what we actually mean by life sciences and how that distinguishes from the payer, provider, and public health side of things, I can tell you a little bit about who we are and what our lifeblood is all about. So we're a strategic mix of disease area and industry experts across all of these different therapeutic areas, which is really a lot. There's a lot of expertise here. And I know in speaking with some of you, we're looking at a lot of advanced degree candidates right now. And you can see that's kind of who we are as well, not just Linlin, Mihir, and myself, but more broadly across our organization. And here we've actually been able to execute upon several launches, you can see there worldwide, by helping our teams in terms of all of the different capabilities that they may have across the development of a product, from where it may be in very early stages, perhaps following lead optimization, to when the product is about to get ready to come to the market and prepare for launch, as well as some post-launch considerations from like a life cycle management perspective as well. And a lot of our leadership also has that broader industry experience, having come from industry or pharma more broadly as well. I should say, I know I've been focusing a lot on pharma because that's my own biased perspective and background, but we also do have experience in med tech, health technologies, and some combination diagnostic devices as well. You can also see where we're capturing different functional areas. So if you, maybe your background is perhaps more along the lines of some of the dynamics from a market access perspective in terms of, you know, insurance policies and that kind of thing, that would be captured under our team as well. And we're further encouraged as well by several centers of excellence that we've been developing as an organization across several different therapeutic areas, as well as solution operations from like a cell and gene therapy perspective, medical technologies, digital health, et cetera. So I know that's a lot of information all at once, but we wanted to give you just a high level overview of Guidehouse and life sciences specifically, just to kind of help orient our discussion in terms of where our background is and where we're coming from and how we may be able to be the right fit for you. Roshni?
Thank you, Stephanie. That was a quick, beautiful overview of Guidehouse. I just wanted to ask a question at this point for someone who's considering this career path. What does a day-to-day of a life science consultant entail?
That's a really good question. Mihir or Linlin, I'm not sure if maybe one of you guys might want to tackle that one.
Sure, I can take this one. I remember when I was in everyone's position like now, I was wondering about the same question. And a typical answer I have got was like, there is no typical day-to-day. And when I actually get this job, I realized that's actually true. But here is just example about different things you may have been doing. For example, like you may be like on a project, need to do market research. That means you spend time to prepare for that. You conduct an interview with the KOL, and then afterwards, you'll summarize your learnings and findings either in the Word document or PowerPoint. But besides your project work, you may also have like other responsibility, like to like connect with your client, update what you have learned from the project, and to communicate like what other askings there. And then those are the working parts. And then you may say on the slides for day one, we have the team happy hour there. So like, despite like you work very hard, we're always trying to find time with our colleagues to make sure we are living a happy life here. And then like there are more different examples for day 3 and day 2 you may read on the slides, but basically that means depends on your projects. You may have like other activities associated, like problem solving sessions with your team, discuss your progress with your manager, and also like within Guidehouse, everyone get mentor or we call pathfinder. You may discuss your development area with your pathfinders to make sure like you also get the support on your work. So like, I think the main point is there are a lot of varieties here, but as a consultant, you do your work, you communicate with your client, you help your team, and also you enjoy your time here.
Thank you. That was helpful. Each of you come from a different background. We have chemistry, we have biomedical, we have Chem BE, biomedical engineering. Is there a role, and do you interact with each other quite often? And is there a role for, we have in the chat box, for PharmD, folks from different backgrounds to work together? What sorts of roles and opportunities are available for maybe an MBA, PharmD degree as well? Mihir?
Yeah, I think to kind of get the ball rolling. So you really look at it not from what your background is, but like what skills you can bring to an engagement, right? So I think someone who's in say a PhD in more like the life sciences, they have a very strong grasp on science and they're able to think very analytically. Someone who has an MBA is really able to connect the dots when it comes to the business side of things and the larger picture, right? So I think the way we organize teams is that you kind of staff for the experience, and then everyone is able to contribute meaningfully in a way that aligns to their level of expertise. But with that being said, consulting is a lot like an apprenticeship model, wherein you learn a lot on the day-to-day. So the amount of learning that I've been able to accomplish over the past 6 months or so has been incredible. And then I just wasn't able I didn't know I was capable of doing all of this work when I was in grad school. So you learn very quickly the tools of the trade, as well as you are able to leverage your experiences towards solving problems.
Excellent. And maybe I can throw this question to Stephanie. So we have an overview of what it entails to be a consultant. We know a little bit about Guidehouse. Can you tell us a little bit, give us insight? Now I'm interested in a career as a life science consultant, as a PhD or postdoc. What steps could I take to prepare in advance for a position at Guidehouse?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really good question. And it even goes to how you are showing yourself off and making sure that you're showing your best self through your resume, because that's going to be the first step as part of your broader application process. So when you're thinking about your resume, and I know a lot of us with that academic background, we've been trained to think about publication. Like, what are we doing on that side of things? And I'm very happy to tell you, at least on our side of the world, your publications don't really matter. We don't care about your publication history or all of the various awards and conferences and things that you've presented at or won. Like, are they good things? Absolutely. Should you shine and highlight them? Yes. But it's really more about the context of the impact of the work that you've done. So I don't need to see your whole publication history to know that if you presented and won first place at a competition, like, that's going to be more impactful to me than knowing like page after page after page of all your publication records, right? And so I think at its crux, what we're looking for is that combination of science and business, something that shows me as one of those resume reviewers, how is it that you've gone from the bench to wanting to know a little bit more about what's outside of the bench? So, have you been involved in, other internship experiences? Have you taken any business classes? Have you been involved in other projects, a consulting club, case competitions? And I will say this as being someone that did not come from a target school. It can be hard sometimes to find some of these resources, but they're out there. And I think for a lot of you that may be associated with Hopkins, you've got a great consulting club, you've got a great case competition. I know that I've participated in the past. So use some of the resources that you have available to bring those things to the fore. And as part of that resume, then you want to make sure that you're highlighting on a single page what the impact of your activities has been, not just, manage this project, but manage this project to what end? What was the strategic impact of the work that you did? So what was the conclusion of, the work in the project that you were involved in? How did it matter? One of the big things that we always say in consulting is, what's the key takeaway? What's the so what? Why? Who cares? Why should I care about, all of these things that you've done? And we do that for ourselves in the preparation of the materials that we do for our clients, but it becomes even more apparent in terms of how we're selling ourselves as well.
Yeah, such great insight. And oftentimes a PhD candidate has the skills required to transition into these sorts of roles. It's what we call transferable skills. On the other end, what makes a good consultant? What makes a good life science consultant? So what skills do you utilize on a day-to-day that you're honing and developing, and that would help you be good at your job? Maybe Lyndon can answer that one.
Sure. And Stephanie, I think we also have a slide on that. So about the core skills can make you a great consultant.
Coming up in just a second.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. But I totally agree with Roshni that you already developed a lot of core skills as a PhD student. So in my mind, doing a PhD is never about like only staying in academia. I feel like two things I learned most from my PhD was, first, I got the skill about analyze a problem, like how to analyze a problem and to find the approach to solve a very difficult problem there. And second, I think I developed the mentality from my grad school experiences. I know I'm tough enough to handle all the difficult situation in my future life. And probably you can all share the experience, like from all the failure in experiments, all the like long nights, like working hard on papers or like, you know, troubleshooting, everything like that. And I think those are the two major things I learned from grad school. And then try to connect that to being a consultant. What we are looking, I think at the top, you may say like the critical thinking, problem solving. Like it's different type of problems in business, but it's transferable. Like you need to understand what the scope, how to like segment, what are the key areas you need to think, and then like how to find a solution. What are the key reasons? What are the solution? And then like what are the impact, like Stephanie just emphasized. And then the second, like here we are looking for the passion and driver for consulting. Like you are coming to the panel today, definitely shows some interest, but maybe you want to emphasize how have you learned about consulting and why, like you show your understanding about the work and show like why you are interested here. And then for the presence and communication skills, like that's the such an important part in our work. We need to communicate with client. We need to discuss with our team. But this is also part of grad school, right? Like you gave like your update in your group meeting. You discuss with your advisor. You present your work in conference. So that's actually, it's very transferable. And even writing papers, like we write on PowerPoint slides, you were writing Word document, but still they are something very similar. You need to write concise and show the great impact, like the discussion section in your paperwork, right? And then like demonstrate the interest in the life science. And I'm going to the left side also like more on the business part. You show you can grasp the organizational and business implications and also show the business acumen. So these are the things like Stephanie just mentioned, you may need to try to develop from other activities outside your lab.
This slide is so helpful. For participants here, Stephanie said that she would be willing to send the slides later, so I'll share this with you. Mihir, when it comes to demonstrating an interest in the life science industry and showcasing your communication skills, maybe in your resume, how much weight should be given to the cover letter as well for those that want to express their interest? Can you speak a little bit about your job application materials in order to use that as a tool to showcase interest?
Right. So I think, like Stephanie was mentioning, like your application is really kind of an interview that really is a first pass when a recruiter is looking at you as a candidate, right? So essentially, I think there's usually two elements to it. So there's a resume, and then there's going to be a cover letter, and oftentimes a cover letter is going to be optional. But like I'll come to that in a bit. But like I think with the resume, right, I think it has to be very concise. So it usually one page, and beyond, it's just assume it's not going to be read. So I once saw a candidate who had like a great second page, but nobody really went to that second page. So I think that happens because like from like a recruiter's perspective, you're getting hundreds of applications. You need to go through every candidate and make a decision very quickly. So how impactful you have that first page matters a lot. And then going into the details for that, you want to like Stephanie mentioned, so show the impact whenever you can. So if you did a conference, try and show like how does it rank in terms of the conferences? Is it one of the best conferences in the world? Is it an international conference? I remember that when I was trying to quantify the impact of my publications, what I did was I tried to get an impact factor and the number of citations I'd gotten for each paper onto the resume. So that really tells the recruiter that I've not just published in a journal that is less cited. It was like a very impactful journal, and then they think that I'm doing top work in my field. And I think as long as it goes to kind of speaking about the life sciences, you definitely, I think a lot of the audience members will kind of be directly working in life sciences. So it should be easy to do that. But for those who may have participated in a course on regulatory sciences, or they've done some work in clinical trials, they've actually been a part of a conference, or even if they attended a conference on kind of how kind of tissue grafting or something like that works. So I think even calling that out and showing that you're trying to get interested, and it's not really a prerequisite as such you to have a PhD in biology to kind of get in, but if you're just able to convince that you're genuinely interested in the life sciences practice, and then we kind of move into the cover letter, right? So I think the cover letter oftentimes is optional, but it allows you to give another reference point to your recruiter to make the case. So maybe you didn't have as much life sciences experience, but you can say that you've been reading a lot on the sidelines, you've been following the industry for a while, you know what the key trends are. So that the cover letter, I think whenever you can, you should draft it, because it can often be the deciding factor if your resumes are very comparable to some other candidates.
Thank you.
I would echo that real quick, Roshni, in terms of the cover letter. And the only other point I really want to emphasize too is the benefit of having informational interviews. So there are people that are, attending this panel that are going to be able to, leverage some of the things that we're talking about today. But say, your friend wasn't able to make it and they didn't get to see, Mihir and Linlin raving about how great Guidehouse is. But, maybe you're like, oh, let's reach out over LinkedIn or something, right? There are platforms available. So reach out, just see, you're interested, you heard about Guidehouse, you want to learn more about it, to get a sense of for yourself, is it the right fit for you? Because I will say, it's not always the right fit for everyone. You have to find what is it that you are specifically looking for, and what consulting firm is right for you. There are differences certainly there. And so I want to make sure that, you take the time and as part of your outreach to do that, and you can highlight that in your cover letter to say, I spoke with so-and-so, they talked about blah, 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 and this is why I want to join Guidehouse, right? It makes your connection and your story that much more impactful.
So helpful. Thank you. I know we're going to come to resume do and don'ts soon. I'll take a step back and kind of zoom in on that business acumen skill and internships, because we had a question from the audience about internships at Guidehouse. Would you recommend doing an internship at Guidehouse? If yes, when is the best time to do one? And do you offer part-time consulting services?
So I think it's a yes across the board. From doing an internship, I think is a great opportunity to get real life project exposure at a very early part of your development process. We do have a rolling admissions process for all of our positions, I will say. The internships typically are in the summer though, so just something to be mindful of as we start getting closer to those summer months. That would be typically when you would be starting in that particular position. There was a few other questions there, Roshni. I'm not sure if you can remind me.
Sure. Do you mind moving the slide to the internship slide, and then I can,
sure.
I can remember the question. The one more question that someone had was, are there part-time consulting opportunities?
I don't think we have part-time consulting opportunities currently. The intern role itself is really that trial run in getting more involved in what our internship and a day in the life really is like, but it's you're living and breathing it. So I think that's definitely just something to be mindful of. I know when I was doing my PhD, we were not allowed to do internships just because of the time commitment. And I think that's something that you want to make sure that you're giving yourself the best shot as well when you're in that particular role.
When would be sort of the best time to do an internship? Say a average PhD career is 5 to 6 years. When do you recommend someone do it?
I would say probably in your third or fourth year, if you're going based off of that. Usually the year before, when you anticipate you might be able to enroll full-time as a full-time candidate. The reason being, you could do 1 to 2 years even before, but it's really more about making sure you know that this is what's right for you. Candidates, after they are going through their intern process, may or may not be offered a full-time position after their internship. And it's really based off of what their intern experience is like. I will say we pride ourselves actually on having a lot of our interns actually stay on after they are brought in-house. And I think sometimes when we look at, and I think about the years past, the interns that we've had, they are sometimes the most successful consultants that we have because of sometimes those initial months where you're able to ask all of the questions that you have, and you're able to be a sponge when you're just starting out. And, you know, it gives you more of that jumping off point for when you're starting full-time.
And I think on that, Stephanie, so definitely we recommend our intern program. I interact with many interns as well, and they all shared like very great experience. But just adding to that, like I didn't do intern myself. I know many PhDs didn't because we were like, many of us were stuck in research, and usually the advisors wouldn't allow you to spend like 2-3 months in the summer. So just want to assure everyone, like if you don't have the time, it's still okay. Like we said, you may show your business acumen and your interest in Guidehouse in so many different ways. So don't want anyone be scared like, oh, I don't have time to do intern. You could still be a valuable member to Guidehouse as well.
That is such an important point. Thank you, Lyndon. I was wondering if we could shift gears just a little bit. So we know a little bit of Guidehouse, we know what it entails, we understand the internship process. At this juncture, let's say we're putting in an application, I'm writing a good resume and a cover letter. What happens on the other end of me sending an application? Can you demystify for us who's looking at my application, and then we'll move on to what are they looking for in my application?
So I might just start this off, and then I'll turn it over to Linlin and Mihir. So after you submit your initial application, your cover letter through our Guidehouse Talent Network, the members of our recruiting team, and so this is specifically, you know, broad for a reason. We have members of our HR team. We also have members of our life science team that are reviewing the resume for candidacy. I myself am one of those primary reviewers for candidacy. And this is, you know, regardless of where you're based. So I am looking at resumes across the US, India, Europe. I'm looking at all of them. And it provides us with a way of saying, okay, there's some consistency here in terms of how we're evaluating candidates for certain, you know, parameters, which we mentioned previously. So once we have gone through that resume review, and there's a lot of resumes. So again, to Mihir's point, that one page and making sure you're highlighting the important things is crucial. We'll select a certain number of resumes then to bring in for interviews. And you can see how we've kind of laid it out here. There's a first round that has 2 pieces with the behavioral interview and then a phone case. And then the final round, which has 2 behavioral interviews and 2 case interviews. I know we're going to be talking about cases during next week's session, but we can certainly go into a little bit more on the behavioral side first. And then, you know, after we go through all of the different rounds of interviews, then you'll be informed about next steps in the next 1 to 2 weeks. But we've been pretty efficient in this process overall. Linlin, Mihir, I'm not sure if there's anything else that you want to add on to this.
Yep, I think we covered that.
Yep.
So for the attendee who asked the question about timeline for recruitment, I hope this answers your question. But the same attendee has a question. Can you share the employee number, application acceptance rate each year? Is that data that you possibly have?
That is not data I have offhand, but I can tell you that we are living in this market with everyone else, right? So we recognize that there's a lot of dynamics at play. One, from the pandemic perspective, with people either working remotely or wanting to change positions, change roles. We are certainly mindful that there's a lot of competition at play as well with other organizations and firms that may also be recruiting top talent. But I think it's not necessarily about the number, but making sure it's the right person, because the right person will be able to do the job for us. And I think that's something that's, important as I think about, even myself in terms of my own development. I mentioned not having come from a target school, quote unquote, in the past, and how we've been able to get the job done. And that networking, I think, is really what helped get me in the door, and could certainly help others as well, which is why, again, I was emphasizing the benefits of like the informational interview and name dropping in your cover letter. There are definitely benefits to that, and being able to bring in talent in that way. Our referral program is one of the strongest. So in terms of our making sure that we're bringing in talent that we personally know, because we think about it in the sense of, hey, if I know this person from grad school or consulting club, or, we were in the same lab many, many moons ago, there's likely going to be a better chance that I'm going to be able to vouch for that person. They're going to do a good job. They're going to be more motivated. They're going to want to stay. They're going to want to keep developing longer. And also thinking about, beyond Guidehouse, it's, I think one of the things that we pride ourselves in is that you're not just a person that's working here and now. We recognize as a consulting firm that sometimes people are coming because they're not really sure what else they want to do next. Mm-hmm. And so in terms of leaving Guidehouse, I think that's also one of the areas where we've seen a lot of our consultants go into industry type of roles and become our future clients. So that's also something to be mindful of as well, how you're being developed more broadly in terms of what it is that you'd like to do.
Absolutely. We have a question from the audience member. How do you feel Guidehouse prepares you for on-the-job training? When you have never been a consultant before and you've been in grad school or a postdoc prior, do you find that there's a support system at Guidehouse that will help you learn on the job? How does that work?
Yeah, maybe I can comment on that, because I've been through the whole process very, very recently. But I would say that don't worry, you'll be all taken care of, because I think the firm does a fantastic job of not only giving you like an early initial set of trainings to kind of learn about what is qualitative research, what is quantitative research, how do you use all the analytical tools that you'll be expecting. So there is a training process for that. And in past years, when we were in a more normal world, we used to have that in person, but I think it's all virtual for the time being. And then in addition to that, you're always kind of paired with like a buddy who guides you through your consulting process, right? So if you have questions about, oh, how is the slide looking, or how do you have great slide design tips, they kind of share their own wisdom and kind of mentor you as in your first few months here, and then you keep those mentorships building and growing over your tenure here. And what I really love about the firm is that every time I was on a new project, there was an incredible amount of support from my fellow team members. So Linlin was one of my first team members on the project, and she was incredibly patient with helping me through how I structure a deck, how I build slides, and how I kind of communicate with clients. And usually it would have been, hey, why is this person kind of taking so much of my time? But I never ever experienced that one bit. People were very helpful, and that's something that really distinguishes Guidehouse, that level of like collegiality and kind of watching out for your team members. I think that was what helped me a lot when it came to onboarding at the firm.
I can definitely echo on that, because I just realized like Stephanie was my first project manager. So we definitely have the tradition here. And my experience is this is like Guidehouse has great culture. Like people are really committed to develop others and like trying to provide feedback, help others to grow. So like I was treated great, like from Stephanie, learned a lot, and definitely willing to like pass on my experience and knowledge to other members. And I'm sure like all the other team members feel similar and willing to do that to like new team members there.
I think that, Linlin and Mihir have highlighted that project specific development that you're getting. And I think your project manager, when you're working with them, is certainly going to be helping develop you as best as they can on those specific pieces. Mihir also touched upon a little bit of like the corporate side of things and that training and development that you might be getting there. The other piece though comes from your specific people manager, your pathfinder, as we call it here within Guidehouse, that's also specifically meant to help guide you in terms of what it is that you're looking for your development, what skills you currently have, who you should be networking with within the firm. They're the ones that are going to be involved in your mid-year and year-end evaluation, making sure that you're getting feedback along the way, reviewing all of the project feedback that you may have been getting across each of the different projects that you've been doing, and having those regular check-ins with you to make sure that you're staying on track in terms of your broader development.
I loved how Mihir said, don't worry, you know, when you get here, we got you. So that was an assurance, I think, to many people who are going to feel a little bit of hesitation around putting that first application. So what you're saying is go for it, we got you. Speaking of, international students and postdocs had a question about opportunities for them. Does Guidehouse generally sponsor visas and support international folks?
We do have some for, I will say, within life sciences specifically. There are slightly different rules, I think, in other parts of the organization, but for life sciences, as a senior consultant, which would be any PhD or MBA candidate would be a senior consultant, PhDs and STEM MBAs would be offered additional support there, yes.
And I'm aware, like, both Mihir and I are applying for H-1B visa, but also I think like people probably are already aware of this. It's a lottery system. Guidehouse can support as much as they can, but in the end, kind of like depend on the luck, right?
Yeah, and in the beginning, you started working on an OPT, correct? So you graduated from, okay.
Yeah,
so
I got the OPT and also the STEM OPT, or we know as the OPT extension.
Thank you for that. Just taking a little bit of a step back and going back to what the recruiter is looking for. My resume has been sent, my cover letter has been sent, and let's talk about good application materials and standout application materials. What does the hiring manager look for in a standout candidate?
Do you want to go into the resume first, Roshni?
Sure. I think that's the next slide, right? Yep. Let's talk about what is a good resume, what constitutes a good resume, because oftentimes we get mixed reviews. It's a 2-pager versus a 1-pager. Mihir said nothing more than a 1-page, so that's Guidehouse specific. How do I make my 1-page resume stand out? Absolutely. Mihir?
Yeah, so I think I would like begin by saying like maximize the real estate that you have on that 1 page. So make sure you have as much as you can have there that supports your candidacy without being, and try to be very concise with it, right? So use very appropriate, concise language, or organized formatting in a way that kind of maximizes usage of space. And then I think going to the earlier point, right? So make sections very well separated. You have like headers. So what I used was something I loved is I use LaTeX for formatting my resume. And that really helps you kind of like really play with the margins so that you can kind of fit as much as you can without it feeling like it's just like a long document that you can't parse through. And then it comes to, again, like within like the specific bullets that you have, right? So I think if you are like a research student, like what research have you been doing and how has that impacted like things on a larger scale? So I was working on like a chemical reaction. I was maximizing selectivity, but it was also funded by an industrial partner. So what I did was frame that research in a way that tied it back to how I had helped the research partners save 30% of the raw material cost. And that was really meaningful in terms of communicating what the implications of my research were, right? So you could have like just left it there, but then it wouldn't have been very apparent to a recruiter, like how has that been impactful given that they don't have a background in chemistry. So I think, and maybe Stephanie and Lenlen, if you had other ways of like standout resume tips.
I think don't underestimate the power of formatting. I think that the margins idea is a really good one. Bolding keywords, italicizing keywords, perhaps. There are also some things I would say just in terms of like, sometimes we'll use abbreviations because that's the way that our brains think, but your abbreviations may be different from my abbreviations. So maybe spell them out on first use as well. Minor thing, you can see the call out about not forgetting to check for typos, comments, formatting. Sometimes we'll get a lot of our friends to review our resumes and we will miss, one thing or another. So just make sure that you have a clean document, because that is a way to stand out in not the right way. And like I think we were saying earlier, right? It's that combination of business and science. So what have you done to really elevate your thinking beyond, the bench? What have you been doing outside of that? And it doesn't necessarily need to be like work experience. It could be relevant experience. So maybe if you were part of a club on campus that was conducting a poll or a survey, and you were taking that survey and poll information and, raising it to campus events for the next happy hour that you were going to do, like there are ways of taking that information and structuring it in a way, pivoting it such that you're making it relevant for the type of work that we would need to do. And like conducting survey, market research, I think is one element. Another way, perhaps if you're doing like analytic type of work, quantitative, computer science type of skills, those types of elements are also very impactful, but it's understanding the type of work that we do and how you can make it relevant.
I guess some tips from my experience is, first, your research advisor may not be the best reviewer for your resume for consulting industry. And second, someone like but not very familiar with you may be a better interviewer, because they will test like how well you are writing about your story. Like for someone never met you, whether or not that person can understand your resume, that's actually I think a better mimic of the potential interviewer there.
Yeah, we have a question from Victoria. Is there a standard resume format preferred for Guidehouse, which is chronological, reverse chronological, combination, functional?
No preference.
Whatever tells a good story.
Yep.
Yep. Okay. We have one question. I don't want to miss this from Yi. How do you demonstrate business acumen for your resume? Any suggestions and examples? I think Stephanie alluded to this a while ago, how you convert some of your past experiences into business speak, like deliverables or results or outcomes. Any other specific examples that you can share from your own work that is business acumen-y?
I mean, I personally had worked in industry before coming to consulting. So I think that was an easy way for me to kind of leverage it. But even that was making sure that I was calling out, I was working at a company, a pharmaceutical company, but, I was working on the strategic side of things, not on like the research and development. So I think my experience perhaps maybe a little bit different from that. But if you have done like consulting clubs, case competitions, if you have any tech transfer experience, pro bono consulting, even if you're doing certain courses in marketing or compliance or something that's just outside of the life sciences, the traditional life sciences, I think that would help satisfy what we're looking for there.
Yeah, even something as you served on a committee or in a student organization and maybe increased the engagement by 30% or something like that. That sounds good as well. So in the last 15 minutes, we want to shift gears a little bit. Maybe we can talk about what you're looking for in a little bit more detail and talk about interviews, and finally talk about Guidehouse culture and what you can expect once you're in a Guidehouse. So perhaps I can ask a few questions about interviews. I know we're covering case interviews next week, but what do you look for in behavioral style interview questions? How should a candidate prepare for an interview with you?
So I think maybe I'll just start in terms of the behavioral interviews. And I know in previous times, perhaps these may have been considered fit interviews. And I'll say like, it's not about fit. It's about behavior. And I think to that point in behavior, you can see in some of these, we've highlighted values, people and company. These are some of our competencies as consultants, that things that we're trying to understand and get your perspective on what you've done in the past. behavior is specifically meant as behavior for a reason. It's what you have done. And I think even more to that point, I'm going to go to another slide actually that talks a little bit about how you can answer the questions themselves for that behavioral interview. And what it really comes down to is, I want to hear your story. I want to hear, what is it that makes you the hero or the heroine of your particular story? Like, what was it that you did? Not your team, because obviously all of our amazing teams shine, but what is it that you specifically did that helped change the way that we were thinking about things? You know, what was the problem? You got to set up the context at a very high level so that we understand the big picture. And this doesn't mean you need to go into super long diatribe about like what it was and, you know, the conflicts left and right. Like, what was the crux of the problem? And then what was it that you were doing that needed to get done? How did you act on it? Like, how did you decide that that was the way to go? And then ultimately, like, what's the moral of the story? What was the conclusion? How was it that, you know, you were able to make all of these savings or, you know, change the course of time? You know, whatever it was that you got to do, that's what we want to hear about.
Mihir?
Yeah, and I think the other thing that I did actively try to do was like really like be conversational about it. I think when you're like nervous and you're kind of holding yourself back because you're afraid of making a mistake, I think that really prevents you from showcasing your true self and making that point across of like how excited were you when you were doing that activity or having that experience, and how you want to bring that energy to Guidehouse. I think like some candidates kind of get intimidated, but it's really like, think of it as a conversation you would have with your friend. It's don't view it like as an interview, because once you get in, you will be friends with everyone, right? So I think just be very conversational. I know it is very tough to do, but sometimes like what I used to do was just like practice, like when I was like speaking to like a friend, how I would like do my responses. And then that way, it came to like the day of the interview, those responses flowed very, very well. And then thankfully, I think my interviewers really like my responses. So I think that's how I kind of like worked on it.
And adding on that, from an interviewer perspective, we genuinely hope you success, because we invested our time here. We are trying to bring the best to our team. So if we are asking your question, usually because we are like sincerely interested in your story. And second, we hope to help you like getting better like in the process. So it's definitely not like we are trying to find ways to fail you. It's actually the opposite here. So if you can see that, you probably can feel like more confident and comfortable in the interview process.
Yeah. We always tell folks that it's a two-way street, it's a two-way conversation, and that you should be asking questions back to the interviewer as well, not just feel like you're in the hot seat. So thank you for that. Let's shift a little bit if everyone's okay. I don't see any more questions about interviews and resumes in the chat box, but more so on Guidehouse. So I'm in, I got the offer letter, I've accepted. Who are my clients going to be like? What is the sort of work culture, working with clients look like?
Yeah, I think we started covering this at the very beginning in terms of pharma, med tech, biotech types of clients. And this just kind of gives you an example of some of the different types of engagements that we may be working with. So I like to kind of think about it in terms of the life cycle of a product. So, you know, who are the right people that we should be engaging with? So are they hematologists, oncologists? Are they immunologists? Are they, you know, general practitioners? And sometimes you may think like, oh, well, that's obvious. If it's Alzheimer's, you're going to be talking to a neurologist. Well, maybe, but you should also be considering a geriatrician, because they're also going to be going to these practitioners first. So it's really getting a broader sense of, right, like who is the appropriate stakeholder that you should be engaging. And I recognize I've been going to the HCP side of things, but there's sometimes patients that we may need to consider in terms of segmenting the patient population, thinking about payers from a commercial Medicare or Medicaid perspective, thinking US oriented, but even more broadly, globally, thinking about national, regional, or local payers that we might need to consider. Getting a little bit more into like the landscape of, you know, what the opportunity actually is. Maybe you have a product that's coming about, being developed, but now you need to think about what's next. And so what is this actually going to look like in, you know, if you were to open up in a new market? I know Linlin and I have been working on a project in Algeria right now. So, you know, what is the opportunity of this particular asset in this particular disease area in Algeria? And so, you know, we go and we learn a little bit more about that. Linlin or Mihir, do you guys want to talk about maybe the right-hand side?
Yeah, I think I can also take over. So I think the other side of it is like as coming into us and into Guidehouse as an engineer, I really wanted to be able to use quantitative skills, and I highlighted that to my managers and kind of leaders on the project. And because I highlighted that, they were able to put me on a lot of quantitative related projects. So what was like designing and analyzing a survey on like a new on that is like for a new therapy in Parkinson's. So I think that was fantastic. I was able to build like a dashboard from scratch for monitoring kind of product launches. That again, it was like a great learning experience. And then in general, I think if you call that out, you can do the work that you want to do once you're in. So there's a breadth of projects, and what you're interested in is also taken into account.
Very nice. Stephanie, this question is for you. We had a question from the audience as well, talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, focusing on the inclusion piece. So now I'm an employee of Guidehouse. How do I feel supported based on groups and identities? You mentioned the happy hours and things like that. Can we speak a little bit about work culture with the lens of diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start just first by shouting out some of our different inclusion and diversity groups that we have. And I will say, just because like I'm a member of, I will say like the Latinx, the Young Professionals, the Women's Inclusion Network as like an active participant, but I'm also a participant just in like the Black Inclusion Network. You know, they had like Black History Month and learning all about the different things that they were covering and celebrating, you know, some of the different events I think that we have as a broader organization. I think this is really great in terms of how it can help foster that progressive work environment. Awareness, I think, is always one of the biggest challenges that sometimes we may overlook. And it allows us to just feel like we have more of a safe space to be able to discuss the things that may be most important to ourselves. And ultimately, it helps you to have more of that collaborative culture. So by having some of these different groups, you know, even though I'm in life sciences, I can actually be meeting with people across healthcare, across energy, financial services, you know, et cetera, just by being a member in one of these different groups. Linlin or Mihir, I know you guys have also been involved in some of these, if you want to speak to them as well.
Sure. So I also like participate in the events hosted by these groups. I remember joining the book club from the Young Professional Network. We discussed about the leadership, and I think also within the like Women's Inclusion Network, we have some like coffee chat and everything. Got the chance to meet people from other segments, and even beyond this, I would say like beyond the inclusion network. I think in general, the company culture is like very supportive and collaborative. Like within my project team, sometimes I definitely remember I was on one project with all like female consultants, like from partner to consultant, like all female, and we call it like girls power, and it feels really good. And clients loved us. So like, yeah, like overall, like people are very helpful and supportive, and you definitely have the chance to join different network to explore different activities. And when you actually have the time, you may also like lead, plan certain activities for your peers there as well.
Very nice. Yeah. Thank you. Mihir, go ahead.
No, I think, and even outside of the networks, right? I think people are incredibly considerate and mindful of when it comes to interacting with one another. So one example that comes up is every time I was introduced to someone, they always ask me, how do they pronounce my name, given that it is not like something naturally comes in English. And that was like a very refreshing change from essentially someone just mispronouncing my name for 6 years straight. So I think that even like just being mindful, no matter if they are a partner, or just like understanding and keeping and making me comfortable into the role, and like trying to understand what my experiences has been. I think that speaks a lot about kind of like the respectful kind of culture of Guidehouse.
I love hearing that. Thank you so much for sharing that, Mihir. Someone asked in the chat box, what does work-life balance look like? And someone else had asked earlier, how has the pandemic sort of changed opportunities to work remotely? First, I guess we'll talk about work-life balance and travel, how often you have to travel.
I can take, oh, sorry, Mihir, go ahead.
No, I think in terms of kind of the reason I think why Guidehouse was so appealing to me is that they really, I think, focus on kind of the balance bit of it when it comes to work and life. I mean, it has been very common that that weekends you do not work, and I think that is just kind of the culture of it. And then in contrast to when grad school, and I was like working Saturdays, Sundays all the time, when I was like, there's like no end to it, I couldn't get out of it. But what happens is slightly a different culture, right? So when you know that everyone else is not going to be working on a weekend, there's really not much you can do on a weekend because of kind of the team model. And even when it comes to kind of like being open about like, hey, this I have like a personal situation at home. Can I take the day off? People have been very respectful of that and very open to that. I actually had one time a manager who said like, I'm not taking enough vacation, so he kind of asked me to take vacation. I think that is something that would have never happened in grad school for me. But I think that it is just kind of the culture of the firm recognizes that we are all kind of contributing to the firm's development. And then if we are not taken well care of, if we are not having like a work-life balance, we won't be able to give our 100% day in and day out. So I think that is where it is coming from. And I'm sure we'll be happy to see what Stephanie and Lyndon have to say.
Yeah, I would definitely, go ahead, Lyndon.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like the leadership, the company definitely like value the work-life balance to make the work sustainable. But I also have to admit, this is consulting. Like sometimes you just have to put the hours there, and we are expected to work hard, especially like we have like final deliverables or something. Like the team rely on everyone to commit and do good job. But at the same time, like if there is really challenging, you know, like your project manager, the leadership are also there to support. Like for example, I have a really heavy month in the past few weeks, and I have both my project manager like discuss with me if I need additional support. We can definitely try to leverage other people, like if they have the capacity. So I think this, I think the main point is like we work hard, but we get the support we need.
Yep.
Okay, and final question for all of you, and it's a take-home message. Each of you may want to have a chance to answer that. What does career growth look like for each of you in your jobs? I'll start with Lyndon.
Sure. So I joined consulting because I sincerely think I like the work here. I enjoy the variety of projects, and I like trying to solve hard problems. I feel that makes my work interesting. So my vision is I would like to stay in consulting for like a longer period instead of using it as a jumping board to different career choices. And then like here in the Guidehouse, I definitely get the development opportunities started from the like consulting skills at the beginning. And then after the discussion with my pathfinder, we are trying to identify new opportunity to lead a team, to be the point of contact for the clients, and then like how to take the leadership in some like internal initiatives. So like I have the regular conversation with my manager to know the area for my development here. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think I would also echo that. I think on Lenlin's side, I've not been at the firm for too long, but I think I would view growth in terms of the amount of new things and knowledge that I'm gaining day in and day out. I think my 6 projects that I've been on so far have been incredibly useful in telling me how complex the pharma industry is, how the processes operate, and then going forward, I want to kind of continue learning to be an expert in terms of expert consultant, and also kind of understand at a broader level how kind of the large scale things operate in pharma. And also continue growing, because I think like Lenlin mentioned earlier, right? So I think no day is going to be the same. Every day has so much new to offer. So why change anything?
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, I'm at a slightly different stage now, being more in the management side of things. But for me, it's now shifting gears from, project execution and doing the work myself to managing and developing my teams, developing the people that are on my teams, developing myself, and developing the business more broadly as an organization. So getting involved in more of the broader company initiatives and ways in which we can improve the resources and productivity of the overall firm.
Thank you all so much for the wisdom, time, and opportunity to learn from you all today. I know this session was very enlightening to all in attendance. So if you're around, you want to do claps, Zoom claps, please do that too. I look forward to hosting you all again next week for the case interview session. So thank you once again, and have a wonderful, wonderful day. Lots of claps in the chat. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much, everyone. Pleasure being with you today.
Thank you.